So our next speaker has investigated UFOs, strange creatures, paranormal for over 20 years. She's a former STAR team manager, currently leads the new special assignment team as Deputy Director of Investigations for the Mutual UFO Network. In addition, she has trained U.S. military and civilian anti-terrorist teams as a master trainer and master instructor, having designed and taught specialized programs related to force readiness and elite force protection. This includes active duty members, Homeland Security, and civilian anti-terrorist personnel. She has authored 2 books. Both are the first of their kind. One is titled Admissible, the Field Manual for Professional Applications, Strategies, and Methods for UFO, Paranormal, and Unknown Biological Investigations. I'll repeat that later. All right. Look her up on Amazon, you'll find the book on there, as well as a children's book called Are Aliens Really Real? She continues to trek around the world to investigate and record strange phenomenon, and in her spare time, really, I don't know, she enjoys hosting Fate Magazine Radio on the Global Radio Alliance, featuring the best stories of the things that are not supposed to exist show. Join me in welcoming Chase Kloetzke.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. I am so sorry for the delay, and I promise I'm going to make it up to you and hopefully not run into the next speaker's time, because it's amazing all the information you're going to hear today, and so I don't want to take 1 word or 1 second away from anyone. It's very, very special time for me to be at this conference this year. I get asked a lot of questions about what started me or my interest in UFO investigations. And it started back when I was 17 years old and I was homesick from school with strep throat. And my stepmother, Mimi, gave me a book. And when I first picked up the book, being 17 years old, I thought, it's a church book. Because the name of it was Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. I set it on my night table, and after, I don't really remember how long it took, but it was a little bit of time when the boredom overtook my reluctance to pick up this church book. When I opened the book, I couldn't believe what I was reading. The questions were shocking. I didn't even know you could ask questions like that outside of the main, curriculum or the mainstream. It just amazed me. I'm like, who asked these questions? Who thought of this? And yeah, I kind of want to know what he's saying about it in the answers section. It absolutely sparked not only my interest in UFOs, but also not be afraid to get out of the box, look for myself, and absolutely ask the hard questions. I've been a field investigator since 1994, and I can tell you that without a doubt, I understand the responsibility of that title. I've always realized that, and over the years and the decades, the responsibilities haven't gotten any easier. There are a lot of boots on the ground out here, and it's very important. I don't necessarily think that it's always wise or even effective to do investigations on the phone. I believe we need to get our shoes on, get in our car, go out and talk to the witnesses, because when we strive and when our goal is to meet an admissibility or a burden of proof for every single case we're working, the most valuable asset, the most important thing we have is the witness and their testimony. You can find all the metal in the fields, any physical evidence we can find, and all it is a piece of metal without that witness telling you why it was there or what they saw. The witnesses are absolutely the heart and soul of all UFO investigations. There are a lot of demands on us as field investigators, but the realities of UAPs and their occupants, they're historical, they are well documented, and this phenomenon does not discriminate. It's a global reality without a specific audience. It affects governments, militaries, families, properties, science and technologies, environmental activities, and religion. Is it realistic to look at every single case that we accept from witnesses who are trusting us with very valuable information and sensitive information? Is it realistic to expect that we reach a burden of proof or an admissibility? Can we expect a public to weigh the evidence and facts that we present as a community of investigators and researchers, to look at our case studies and look at our evidence? Can we trust them with that level of discernment? I think we can. I think the public is ready. I think they're interested. I think they're motivated to find out more about the realities that you and I all know are going on every day. So why is the topic still not in the mainstream? Mainly, guys, we have challenges. The investigators are doing their jobs, but the challenges are real. The challenges are many. I highlighted 4 because I believe these are probably the 4 most dreadful, the hardest ones to not only accomplish and get over, but they're not going away either. The cover-up is real, and it is ongoing. And the first one I'd like to hit is, let's pull the curtain back on these secret keepers. Who are these secret keepers? One is, I picked 3 of my favorite quotes and some of the things that are going on, but not specifically the people, more of what they represent. So here we have Ronald Reagan, and June 11th in 1985, he was having lunch. And I found this quote, it's a popular quote, and you can read this in the Reagan Diaries, it's page 334, but Ronald Reagan says, "Lunch with 5 top scientists, it was fascinating. Space is truly the last frontier, and some of the developments there in astronomy, etc., are like science fiction, except they are real. I learned that our shuttle capacity is such that we could orbit 300 people. I'm shocked. 300 people? I haven't seen that space shuttle. And this was said in 1985. The next one, Ben Rich, CEO, president of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. We're all familiar with this man. He says, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to the benefit of humanity. Anything you can imagine, we can already do." Our next one comes from the scientific community, and we have Dr. Harry Cliff. He's a particle physicist at the European Organization for Nuclear Research. We know it better as CERN. He says, "The next few years may tell us whether we are able to continue to increase our understanding of nature, or whether maybe, for the first time in history of science, we could be facing questions that we cannot answer." I find these statements shocking because in a lot of ways, these are the guys out front. They're the R&Ds, they're the people that are dealing with the latest in all of our technologies. And one last video I'd like to highlight is Jan Harzan. He's the MUFON executive director. He had a meeting a few years back where he went to a talk where Ben Rich was speaking. He had a few minutes with him in the back, and I want to play for you how this went. Thank you, Ed.
I asked you about what happened with you and Ben Rich. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, sure. Well, basically what happened was back in about January of 1993, I got a flyer from my School of Engineering, where I'm a Bolter Associate, which is basically a alumni group that you pay to belong to. And one of the things they try to do, because you are funding the school, is to put on events for you. So the event was, I believe, March 23rd, 1993, a engineering school alumni event for Bolter Associates to come and hear Ben Rich speak. So I had this flyer. I contacted my friend Tom Keller, who had graduated 10 years before me, who has an interest in UFOs and the whole subject, and had lived out in Palmdale, and asked me if he'd like to go with me to the meeting. And so we went. There were about 200 people in attendance. We sat in the front row, as I recall, and we listened to about an hour and a half of Ben Rich talking about his 40 years at Lucky Skunk Works. He had just retired as the past chairman, president, CEO, and chairman of Lucky Skunk Works. And he was just sharing slides from YouTube, everything from YouTube all the way up until, I believe, the F-117. And so this was about 30, 40 slides. He was showing a lot of different aircraft that they had built at the Skunk Works. But when he finished, the last slide was a black disc zipping off into outer space. It was, remember, this is a slide, so we kind of have the artist's swish marks on it, zipping off into outer space. And he ended the talk with the words, "We now have the technology to take ET home." And the entire place busted up laughing. And Tom and I just looked at each other like, did he just say what we think he said? Because Tom and I had done our own trips out to Area 51 together in a van and stayed overnight and observed some pretty interesting things. So we said, we've got to find out more about this. So there was a polite Q&A session, and then the meeting ended. And about 25 people followed him up to the front of the room to kind of gather around him after it was all over and to talk. And he basically had these conversations with people. And so it started off with very polite questioning, and it turned to more direct questioning. But you mentioned this ability to take ET home. Can you tell us more about that? And so he basically said that there's an error in the equations, and it was plural. We've discovered what it is, and we now have the technology to travel to the stars, or take ET home, I think is what he actually said. And so he wouldn't quite go into any more detail. I mean, I asked him once or twice, like, how does it work? He didn't really want to go there. After it was all over, he turned around and said, I have to go now. There were maybe down to about 8 of us. And he started to walk away, and I followed him. He was walking to his car. I followed him in the room, and I said, Mr. Rich. And he turned around and looked at me, and looked me up and down, who are you? And I said, hi, I'm Jim Harrison, I'm an alumni. I said, I have a real fascination with what you were talking about. I said, particularly the propulsion side of this thing. I said, can you tell me how it works? And he said, well, let me ask you, how does ESP work? And I took about 2 steps back, and I thought, I wasn't expecting a question, I was looking for an answer. And I just quipped real quickly. I said, I don't know, all points of space and time are connected. He looked at me and said, that's how it works. He turned around and walked out of the room. So, I mean, those are the 3 biggies that he talked about. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff he talked about, but it's basically, we now have the technology to take ET home. Number 2, there's an error in the equations. And I'm thinking that's Maxwell's equations, but I don't know. I even asked him which equations, and he wouldn't tell me. And third thing is that it basically works via ESP, is however ESP works, how it works, all points of space are connected. I think that's the key to this thing.
I find these statements completely fascinating because, one, I picture Ben Rich, CEO and president of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. He's huge. His information, his knowledge, the advancements that he has put forth in just R&D and in technologies. Unfortunately, the military gets it all, but it's amazing that this man would stand up in front of his alumni and his colleagues and stand there, put on this professional PowerPoint with the planes and all the things that Skunk Works has put out there. He's proud of this. He wants to show the technology. And then the last slide is a little disc zipping off. It doesn't make sense that he would think that was funny. I think it was calculated that he got exactly what he wanted. The giggles were okay. However, there were a couple in the audience that got it and asked him questions. I find it just remarkable that a lot of these people are putting out breadcrumbs, and that's what we call them in the field. They're breadcrumbs. It's like they're dropping us little bits of information, and if we're paying attention, we're catching it. It's very important as investigators and researchers to know that this is going on. When we look at the cover-up, when we're finishing up the cover-up when it comes to technology, Ben Rich said it best. When it comes to getting information that we pay for as taxpayers, all the things that are covered up in the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, you name it, it's so compartmentalized that it's so buried and dark right now, he said it. It would take an act of God. Our next huge obstacles, believe it or not, is the internet. And when it first came out, the first things I did when I got my computer was I searched on AOL the word UFO. And I was shocked to see how much was on there already. It was amazing. And we had forums, and there were, these news sites, and you could get all this information, and we were going crazy, just dividing and sharing and networking. It was awesome. And as the internet has grown, so has the information. Unfortunately, the internet also offers the curse to the blessing. And that is a cloudy and polluted pool of information, and it's almost impossible to get in and find what's really going on out here. Where's the real data? Where is the truthful information? Where is the scientifically investigated or the vetted information? Now bring in something new, which is the social media. I'm what they call a web refugee. I had to learn all this technology as an adult, and later adult, by the way. My grandkids absolutely understand the technology. My children understand the social media and the behavior in it. I, however, am having a hard time. I don't like the Kardashians. And sometimes I feel like there's this reality show happening on social media. But even social media becomes so littered with arguments and proclamations that invite even the sincerest researchers and investigators right into their fancy websites and pages of interest. It's become a business of how many likes you can get and how many hits on your website. It's all generating around money, and it's polluted. It's difficult to negotiate. It's one of the big obstacles. I often wonder, for a brand new person just wanting some information about the realities of UFOs, how difficult it would be for them to just do what I did and put in the Google search bar UFOs, and what would come up. We can fight this social media takeover, or we can learn to do things better ourselves, and how we present our information. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And there are ways that this is happening. One event that I believe absolutely established a landing page, and it's one of the best pieces of information. It's this nice little package that we can direct all the new people or interested parties that approach us, and I will also be talking about that in a moment. But I'm referring to the citizens' hearing on disclosure. The next hurdle that I would like to also talk about are the things that are man-made, the things that we know are up in our skies, the things that we know exist. The drones are killing us. They're absolutely killing us. But it's also a booming technology, and this technology is offering more advancements so quickly, it's almost monthly. You will see something new come out on these. One of the things we do as UFO investigators is try to identify the things that we can, the things that we know are up there, the things that we are making ourselves. Although I will tell you that after almost 24 years in the field, we are investigating two kinds of UFOs, ours and theirs. I do believe in a secret space program, and that is another talk a little bit later on. But even keeping up with our own known aircraft, that a lot of this you can find on the internet. There is somebody who actually is taking this on, the drones, and that is Cindy Bailey Dove. She's a MUFON Special Assignment Team investigator, but she's also one of the drone researchers that's been out in the front lines for a long time. She has a Facebook page, getting ready to launch a web page, I believe. But due to efforts of our researchers like Cindy, we're learning a lot about the shapes, sizes, activities, the light configurations on the bottom to make these a whole lot more identifiable. Thanks, Cindy. You rock, girl. I love when people are out there getting some work done. It's awesome. But thanks to her efforts, we have a lot of references that we could take our UFO sightings and compare them to things that she's putting up. Known sky objects are overwhelming, and trust me, the one thing we're not going to rely on are the phone apps. I love the phone apps that tell us, oh, well, let me tell you where the satellites are, so you can look at your reports to see if we had a satellite in the area at that time. I promise you, China is not going to tell us where their satellites are. I promise you, we're not going to tell you. The satellites that are up there and the space object, this photo actually comes from NASA. I thought this was interesting. It's a very, very dark gray helicopter, and it's as quiet as you can imagine. We've heard about these for a while, haven't we? But the different shapes and sizes, they're just amazing. These land on aircraft carriers. They're humongous. So this is just an example. This one, however, is my favorite. And I have a little video for you on this. And look at this thing. Can you just imagine seeing this? Going down the highway. Homeland security and critical infrastructure. What do you bet that means? They also go over water. They can be tethered or fly on their own. But look at how they operate. Look, they're smooth. Oh boy. Law enforcement. Scary, right? Custom police wording. Another thing this drone offers. Permanent surveillance. It's just a small glimpse, everyone, that the most shocking thing about this is that these are deployed. They are deployed in our towns and cities, and they are deployed over our waters. It's just something to keep in mind that not everything we see out there is necessarily unidentified or extraterrestrial. Sometimes it's our own technology that unless you're looking for, this is wide open on the internet. This information's out there. A little scary that it says police departments, things like this that you would expect to see on their nice little video showing all these, special operations and big Navy and, big deployed operations out there, and yet they're worded for local law enforcement. This is one of the newest ones. It's from the ECA group, and their technology is cutting edge. They're cutting edge. Everything from homeland critical infrastructure use, and also the law enforcement tags. Be very, very careful, guys. These things are out there, and their purpose is acquisition and detection. The next hurdle that we face is probably, it's my least favorite, because it's one of the most effective, and what I consider one of the most diabolical. And the next challenge is disinformation. We have been barraged with this form of counterintelligence since the beginning of the modern UFO era of investigation and inquiry. It's effective and the most damaging and diabolical, dagger thrown at us. And it's the most effective campaign. It's just brutal. The information that seems truthful, relevant, and based on unbiased facts, but has been concocted to mislead the recipient in order to attain fraudulent monetary, military, political, or religious objectives. The information explosion has been continuously shadowed by an almost equally powerful disinformation explosion, especially on the internet. You would think that this source would be something that came from us, correct? It does not. The source of this definition is a business dictionary. Disinformation is something that hurts us all. It's very, very effective. It can cannibalize some of the best research. It completely undermines everything we're doing out here, and it's used constantly. One of my least favorite disinformation beliefs out there, and one of the biggest campaigns they've been using since almost day one, is that investigators cannot use a scientific method. We take a lot of heat for the things that we come up with when the boots are on the ground, when we're digging in deep. However, it was talks like we heard right before this from David Mahler. Clearly, people are doing it right. The scientific investigation, or the scientific method, is the same wherever you put this in context. From an observation, we are then going to research what is currently known about what we're looking at. Form a hypothesis, I put in yellow because this is not when an investigator would do it. However, if you're a scientist, that's exactly where you're going to develop a hypothesis to take further. As an investigator, we stay dispassionate until the end. We may have some ideas and follow some stronger leads than others, but it's definitely, at this point, is not where we would put that hypothesis. But the next step would be, we're designing a procedure or an investigation plan. That's when we figure out, are we going to go get evidence first? Are we going to talk to the witnesses? Do we canvass? Are we going to go ask the 7-Eleven that has video footage if they caught anything? This is when we're going to do this. We're going to collect the data. I call myself a data collector. We're going to test this data. We're going to corroborate and retest. Then we're going to publish our findings. And then we always evaluate the investigation. I call it an after-action report. And I always go through this. This is the scientific method. This is everything we're doing. Every single case that we get, every phone call, every report that I accept, the first thing I do is sit down and break it down. As an engineer, that's what we do. We take it, we work the problems. We figure out where the strengths of the case are and the things that we need to work and find out more about. Convincing the general public that we're capable of this is probably one of the biggest challenges, and it's a never-ending battle. Very, very successful tactic. The other thing in disinformation, and you guys have heard this before, if you can't kill the story, discredit the witness. Discredit the investigator. We have watched our witnesses that we have asked to come forward in good faith absolutely put it all on the line and lose everything. I believe as investigators, we need to be more responsible for exactly what happens when we ask our witnesses to come forward, the people that trust us the most. We need to circle our wagons, call our friends, kick some doors, whatever it takes. We're going to fight for the credibility to remain where it belongs and to stop with this disinformation. But through all of the mentioned challenges, the last 4 that I've hopefully quickly gone through, we have successes. We have huge successes. It's all good. The most sufficient challenges are absolutely real. We are facing them, we are overcoming them, and there is real information. Have we met that burden of proof? Is it possible? Is it necessary? These are all the things that we're going to talk about next, because the difficulties between investigating a crime or an investigation fraud, insurance fraud, is that we're investigating things that are not supposed to exist. The burden of evidence and proof, where are we going to find it? Where do we find it on the internet? And how do we embrace it? And this is going to be one of the best places. Let's just take a look.
Giving your consent to be videoed. If you haven't read those notices, I encourage you to look at them on the doors at the entrance to the room. Again, books, DVDs, other materials by our various witnesses are available in the hallway out the double doors to stage left.
Absolutely the wrong video, guys. But let me tell you, there were 40 witnesses, 10 different countries, 6 former members of Congress, all independent of the UAP knowledge and phenomena. We had people from Canada. We had Brazilian members of government, Canadian members of government. We had a former FAA lead investigator. These credentials and reputations are huge, and they're benchmarked, and they're highly respected not only among their peers and their community and their countries, but they're also very, very respected with their colleagues. The burden of proof is met. When I sat at that citizens hearing and day one opened, and I watched my heroes and some of my best friends raise their right arm and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and they were sworn in just like a Senate committee. And they sat down and they started presenting information, and they started telling of what they knew, what their research was, the evidence that they had. They were putting this stuff forward. It was one amazing step after another. It was probably the one time and in 1 week that they absolutely nailed it with the best of the best. This is where I walked away literally knowing that I had to be better. I had to be better for the kind of witnesses that I saw coming forward and the investigators and my peers that were there, that we absolutely had to do this better. When your heroes like Linda Moulton Howell are up there just presenting the most professional. When Richard Dolan, it's funny, I was standing between a CNN reporter and a New York Times photographer. Richard Dolan gets done with his opening statement, and one of the reporters turned around and looked at us and said, "Checkmate." Like, he was done. he was ready to go home, write an article, he was ready to go. But that citizens hearing, I wish you could have seen the video. You guys would have been standing up and cheering. It's one of those motivational, but truthfully, these are the type of events that we need to pull together. What we're doing here this week is exactly what we need to put together. These things are being recorded. The people that are watching live all over the world through live feeds, this is exactly where we want to point people to the information, where the proofs are, where the researchers, where the latest in what's going on. You guys are going to hear so much great information about things happening out here. It's amazing. But is the burden of proof met? If the video had been playing, you guys would have probably said, yes, it is being met, because I had quite a few things up there. But the other thing is, let's add the people who have actually been in space, the people we trust, the people that are trained. They're trained at such a remarkable level. The education that they have to have, the amount of knowledge, the physics, the technologies, and then we put them, the bravery, we put them in these, physical contraptions and put their bodies through everything to make sure that they can measure. These people have been there, and we have many of them on the record coming about their not only belief, but maybe even a witness or two about what they saw up there. But astronaut Gordon Cooper, best known for Gemini 5, Mercury Atlas 9. One of my personal favorites is Marina Popovich, not only because she's a female, but she's tenacious. You know, she comes from the Soviet Union, the KGB, a member of the KGB coming out. Boy, she loves talking. She loves telling you everything. But retired Soviet Air Force colonel, she's an engineer, legendary Soviet test pilot who holds 102 aviation world records, set over 40 types of aircraft. That little girl's a rock star. I just love her. But again, not the only people that have been up there. Let's hear from another one of our...
There is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any kind of traditional materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness. They use toroids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon, and how they can work, manipulate time and space locally so that they can have their own anti-gravity propulsion and their own field of energy that's isolated, gravitational field, electro-gravitational field that's different.
Oh my gosh, right? And of course, this comes from the documentary Thrive, which I absolutely love. But what'd he say? Consciousness technologies? Again, we've been hearing this from our abductees, contactees, and experiencers for decades. All they had to do is ask us. We can tell these scientists exactly how this is working. It's about the consciousness, the technologies that the extraterrestrials are using, not only to get here, but how they communicate and interact with humanity. It's one testimony after another, and now we have science. Princeton physics professor has no reason to come out and say things like this unless he believes them and they have reason to believe it's true, if they have reasons of proof. So, is the burden of proof enough? The next thing is definitely we have direct witness statements, we have physical evidence, we have trace evidence, we have radar reports of UAPs, we have government documents and reports, we have mass sightings, historical reports, all from around the world. Remember, this is not a United States issue or the UK. This is a global phenomena. It doesn't discriminate. We have photographs, we have videos. All of this is considered direct evidence and would qualify in a court of law. This story is not going away. It's burgeoning because of everything that we have going on. Everyone has a cell phone. We're getting reports coming in. We almost can't keep up. The story that isn't going away, I believe, is also evidence. It's also to place in that preponderance and into that pile for the simple fact that this isn't new. This has been going on and on and on. It's historical. This isn't something that Hollywood created through their movies. This isn't something socially, we're all watching these or have a fear of the economy that, as a population, we're all hysterically blaming it on extraterrestrials. It's ridiculous. We have just such a history of one report and sighting before there were planes in the air, before there was anything up there, and as we will hear later on in part 2 of Eric von Daniken, it's been going on since ancient times. So are we reaching that burden of proof? While on an expedition, I learned something very important. I've been to 3 different continents, several islands, including Guam, all through the Marianas type thing. I have to tell you, not everybody thinks like we do. Not every culture or population needs the type of proof that our citizens, our colleagues, and the people in the United States and in the UK pressure us to deliver. Not everybody needs that. One of my favorite things that has happened was while visiting Peru and in Bolivia, I had an opportunity. I'm down by Cusco, and the mayor of Pisco wanted to come with us. We're walking up to this pyramid, which is not even on the radar of the Ministry of Culture down there yet, and there's thousands of these that are off the grid, and we stayed off the grid. We were looking for the elongated skulls, but it led to this pyramid. And the mayor, who was very, very excited about a UFO investigator being a part of this team, and I was the token UFO investigator. But I loved that when he found out what I did and who I was, he started to tell me a story. And it was very important to him that I was listening, because while we're standing on this pyramid, and back you can see the lush green area, and there used to be a lake back there, this big, beautiful lake, he was telling me, and this is all through an interpreter. And he said that the villagers were getting very excited because this huge object, this UAP, would come down, and it was taking the water. And it was alarming the residents, not because of the object, because it was taking their water. And it continued to do so, and the lake's no longer there. So through the interpretation and the obvious culture differences, I asked him if he would like me to go and get soil samples of where the lake used to be to see if I could find anything. And this is what he does. No, I don't need you to go and check out that lake bed. So he's telling me again that this object kept coming down and taking their water. Trying to understand that, are you just telling me this to write down? Is it just a historical event? You just want me to know this information? And he says, no, you need to investigate. And I'm really trying to figure this out. Well, after a few minutes of back-to-back, I finally get it. He wants me to fix it and tell them to stop taking their water. Like if you're having a problem and you call the police department and the investigator comes out, he'll talk to the other people, he talks to you, everything gets settled. It was so amazing that he did not understand that as an investigator, I'm there for evidence and I'm still collecting data. And when I told him that was my job, again, I got he says, do you not have UFOs in America? You come all the way down here to find evidence on UFOs. He really found my whole presence there quite puzzling, which I walked away with a whole new lesson. And the lesson was, the whole world doesn't think like we do. There are communities and populations out there that absolutely don't need it. It's embedded in their culture. They know they exist. They're comfortable with it. They're okay. They've always been here. That's what we heard all through Peru and Bolivia. They've always been here. We heard them called everything from angels to watchers to the star gods. They're comfortable. It's just part of their day. Nothing shocking. And yet here I come, and I'm getting my little friend's kit's out, and he's just looking at me like, what are you doing? Just go fix it. It was amazing. It was amazing. It's one of my favorite stories, and I like to remind people that I'm talking to that, while we're traveling around the world, and this is a global phenomena, global reality, that not everybody's affected the same way as the Americans out here. So again, the story of the mayor and their take on the UFOs, again, are we finding that burden of proof? So is it enough? And this is something we need to ask ourselves. But we have to ask another big question. Are we really ready for the truth? Because every time we get close, here come those secret keepers, and here comes that disinformation, and they're going to start taking us out. The ridicule factor, we start getting a little attention from the media. We start getting the cases out there that are, making headways, and there's a lot of discussion. Here it comes, crawling in, seeping in. It's something we have to stand up for. We have to stand up for that truth. It's also easy to dismiss when all it takes is a Facebook post saying, I'm not buying it, that person's crazy. Okay. Are the demands of the past reasonable? And this is another question that we think about today as the modern UFO investigator. We honestly have to look back on the things that worked in our cases in the past and the things that we're no longer going to put into place. The things that I don't want to put into place, one thing that comes to mind, lie detector tests. Does it make anyone believe that person any more? We've had decades to look at the effects of how we work cases and what didn't. I'd love to ask Bob White, Travis Walton, Chris Bledsoe. I could name off several other people with the lie detector tests and ask them, did it help their case? Did it help the witness? Did it make their case more believable to a public that probably isn't ready anyway? So there are many things that we have to come to terms with when we're trying to meet the burden of proof. Do these things actually get us there? And that's probably the responsibility of the UAP investigator. When it comes to witnesses and our evidence, we have to be smarter. We have to put our time and invest our time in the things that are going to make a difference, things that the public is going to believe or in the best interest of the witness, that when we hand them our case file at the end of our investigation, they understand. We've done our job. We've done due diligence. We've unrooted everything that we have, but that case file belongs to them, and we owe them the best we have. This is one of the, I quote Steve Bassett a lot. I think he's tenacious and he's on it, he's aggressive, and that's exactly where we need to be these days. But the responsibilities of all of this fall within the community. If we're going to meet a burden of proof, if we're going to meet that admissibility, if we're going to give this information to the public, we need to have that mindset. We need to be bold. As Stanton Friedman calls it, unapologetic ufologists. We know the science behind this. Everybody's looking for them. Everybody. We have the Vatican on Mount Graham. We have religious institutions looking for extraterrestrials. Of course they are. We have our MIT, some of the best minds and the smartest people. They're all looking. They're all developing technology to get out there. That's exactly what they're doing. We have the government's looking. Everybody's looking, and yet they're laughing sometimes and giggling at us. It's time we stand up. And how we do that is to raise that bar. And yes, raising the bar with events like Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, which, by the way, 29 years, no small feat. This is ridiculously successful and awesome. And the information coming out, but the citizens' hearing of disclosure. But it's also time to change our language. And this is one of my favorite quotes that came out this year. First and foremost, the truth advocacy movement is not about UFOs, and it hasn't been for many years. It's about an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. The acronym UFO was foisted upon the issue by the government and picked up by the media as a convenient way to keep the issue contained. UFO is now an anachronistic non sequitur, about as relevant as referring to atomic physics as the study of UTPs, unidentified tiny particles. That's raising the bar. This is exactly where we're going today. We've met that admissibility. We've knocked it out of the park. Do we have proof? We absolutely do. Again, there's things out here that we're focusing on, reevaluating, just like you do in a scientific investigation. What's worked in the past, what's going to work in the future. What you see before you here is a new technology. It's something that, it's brand new, it's being deployed. It's called a CubeSat. UFO investigators will have their own satellite up. No one's going to be taking our pictures for us. No one's going to have control of those pictures. It's coming right to the public, coming straight to the public. I wish I could take credit for this. It wasn't my idea, nor was it my campaign. This definitely comes from David Schock. And of course, the model is Tom Jansen, who's, you see many models of him out there at the KGRA table. But this is where we're going. Our days of sniffing dirt are over. I love this. I love this. We're collecting evidence with forensic tenacity. We're using the proper protocols. We have the right tools. We have industry tools. We have access to scientific communities that'll help us analyze our evidence. We're doing it every day. We have met this burden of proof a while ago, and we continue to go forward. We continue to take this even further. If you ask a ufologist, are UFOs real? We'll tell you, asked and answered 10 years ago. Are extraterrestrials visiting our planet? Are they interacting with humanity? Oh my gosh, absolutely. Asked and answered 10 years ago, so 5 minutes ago. What we're doing now is really, really focusing in on exactly who are they and what do they want. That's our next burden of proof. Absolutely raising the bar. And as I wrap up, everyone, I really want to make sure we stay on time. So if I need to cut this short, it's okay a little bit. I do want to tell a story. So there's a mom, and she has 2 little kids. And one of the kids is absolutely always sad. He's negative about everything, and he's fearful. He lives in this fear state, and he's so afraid of things. Afraid the world's going to end, afraid bad aliens are coming, or he's just afraid of everything just being dark and things not going to be turning out well in the end. And then she has another little boy who's happy. He is just always so cheerful and only sees the bright side of everything. And she worries for him because he's going to get hurt, because bad things do happen to good people. She doesn't know how to balance this out, so she comes up with the plan. And she puts each kid in a different room. And the negative little boy she puts in a room full of nothing but his favorite cakes and cookies and his favorite toys, and she shuts the door for the night. The other little boy she puts in a room full of nothing but horse manure, and she shuts the door for the night. The next morning she wakes up, she opens the door to the room to the negative little boy, and he's standing there and he's crying. And he's boo-hooing, and yet not a toy has been played with or a piece of cake bitten into. She's like, how can you be upset? You have all your favorite toys, the best cakes and cookies, and he says, well, if I play with my toys, they might break. And if I eat the cake, it will be all gone. Frustrated, she throws up her hands and she walks to the next room. She opens the door, and the little boy that was in this room full of horse manure all night long is flying around, leaping, throwing manure everywhere. And she's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? How can you be so happy? And he picks up manure and he's like, because Mom, there's a pony in here somewhere. The reason I tell this story, thank you. The reason I tell this story is because, there are some that are going to grumble. They are absolutely going to grumble. Oh, if I go out there, I'm not going to find anything anyway. All there are lights in the sky. We can't do a scientific investigation. Who's going to believe me even if I do find something? It's just not worth going out there. It's ridiculous. Let me just go on Facebook and interrupt everybody else's information. Or we could realize that there's mountains of information. There's mountains of evidence. We have all that direct evidence that I stated earlier. We have witness statements, tens of thousands. We have government documents, tens of thousands. We have physical evidence, trace evidence. We have radar. We can throw on photographs, vetted photographs. We can throw on top of that the videos. Then we can add a few more from the politicians and the ministry, people from the Department of Ministries or whatever they're called all over the place. We have senators, governors. We have Podesta, Clinton. Throw those up there too. Throw everybody up there, and they have a great big mountain of evidence. Is that burden of proof enough? Because I'm telling you, there's a pony in there too. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.